sometimes he couldn't believe that he had the life that he'd always wanted.
Murray Shaw seemed to have it all. So when the respected college professor was found dead in a hotel room in Vancouver's downtown east side, it changed the way some saw the city's spiraling fentanyl crisis. The idea that if it could happen to Murray, it could happen to anyone. Murray's wife is heartbroken, but she shared her husband's story with the CBC's Chris Brown, hoping to change the conversation about how we treat addiction.
We know that excellent care begins with the right facts, and the facts here are devastating.
A community needing comfort came together recently at Vancouver's Christ Church Cathedral.
Last year alone, over 900 people died of overdoses.
I think in some ways I still am in a bit of shock sometimes that he's gone.
Sasha Wood was among those in the pews. She had a happy life with her husband, Murray Shaw. Shaw was an avid athlete and a respected member of the faculty at a Vancouver community college until the killer drug fentanyl stole everything away.
I think as I sat here, I felt sad, but then I started feeling really angry. I just felt like this is crazy. This is like I'm really angry now. I just think this is like, when's it gonna be enough? Like how many people have to die?
Drug overdoses killed almost 1,000 people last year in BC. Right now, there are 4 or 5 new deaths every day, and the crisis is getting worse. Wood said she wanted to tell us her husband's story to demonstrate how the healthcare system is failing those with addictions.
Fentanyl is kind of breaking the molds in terms of everything that we've thought about in terms of, you know, heroin and drugs in general in our society, and that it's just so incredibly toxic.
Addictions experts.
Overdose, East Hastings Street.
He works at St. Paul's Hospital in downtown Vancouver. It's at the epicenter of the fentanyl crisis.
That's absolutely jumped the bounds of what we'd consider the sort of traditional heroin-using population, people who are street entrenched because of the toxic nature of the drug supply, even people who are occasional users and people who don't think they're at risk when they're snorting something or they're injecting something, and it turns out to be fatal.
I like that one. His eyes look very, just like Murr, very kind.
At their home in New Westminster, Sasha Wood still keeps her husband's bicycle in their living room. Shaw was 57 and loved sports. He loved his job, too. He was a sociologist who taught at nearby Douglas College.
He used to always come home and say how much he loved his life. Like sometimes he couldn't believe that he had the life that he'd always wanted. So he was I used to get jealous because he'd always be going on like almost every day, like, I'm so lucky.
Perhaps he appreciated his life so much because once before, he'd come very close to losing everything. In his late 20s, Shaw had a problem with booze. An alcoholic, he got treatment, and Wood says he didn't have a single drink in almost 20 years. But then, on a bike trip with some friends in the U.S., he cracked open a beer, and Wood says that's all it took to send his life spiraling down.
I think that's what was so traumatic for him is when he had that relapse, he was shocked that everything could get so bad so quickly and all the consequences that came with it.
Sasha Wood says Shaw struggled to stop drinking. Douglas College paid for him to get into rehab twice, but she says she now believes her husband likely left the program too early, worried about being off work for too long. When he returned home, she says he quickly progressed from booze to harder drugs.
Yeah, I wouldn't have any idea that he was dealing with addiction issues.
Bill Angelbeck is also a sociologist at Douglas College, and he regularly had lunch with Shaw.
Well, he was withdrawn and reserved, and I just thought, give him some space, maybe. And now, of course, why? You just wish, well, had that conversation, and we could have talked about that. It was a conversation you wish you could have had and didn't. And you just don't think something like this is going to happen, right?
The healthcare system has basically said they're not dealing with this.
The stigma of drug use, says Dr. Evan Wood, is part of what's killing people. He says the healthcare system treats addiction differently from other illnesses.
Come on, buddy, you can make it.
With tragic results.
If I was having chest pain and I went into the emergency room right now having a heart attack, I'd be seen by a team of doctors. If you show up in an emergency room in Canada with addiction, people are just going to kind of look to you like this. Even in well-developed urban areas like Vancouver, where there's been long-standing problems, I have been saying the system isn't broken. There isn't a system. We don't have a system of care for substance use in Canada.
So there's so many things that could be improved rather than just treating him in isolation.
Sasha Wood says families of addicts are often overwhelmed and get too little information about how they can help.
And often people say, don't feel guilty, there's nothing you could do. But I know that there's things I could have done differently. I think I was sort of traumatized and not thinking clearly, and I was like, oh, okay, well, if you're not going to do it again, then I guess you're not going to do it again. And it just got worse and worse.
This past March, barely 14 months after Shaw chugged that first beer, he left his wife at home and headed to Vancouver's downtown east side.
He came to us because he, talked to us. He knows it's no judgmental.
There he met Dale Brown, an addict himself, who occasionally shared heroin with Shaw.
He realized, that it was a relapse, right? And he felt that he was just drowning in pressure, right?
One night, instead of going home like he told Brown he was going to, Shaw instead checked into a room at the budget Patricia Hotel, alone, to shoot up.
I wish I would have got him just to crash out on the couch, I feel my own guilt.
Shaw spent his last night in room 406. When he didn't come home, Wood says she called police. A couple of hours later, came a knock on the door. Her husband was dead.
Yeah, it was the saddest moment in my life. And just the fact that he was alone in a hotel by himself when he died, suffering and probably feeling very guilty. And because all his notes in his journals say that that was his biggest fear, is that he would die and cause his family and me pain.
The coroner's report listed the cause of death as fentanyl. It was likely mixed in with the heroin police found next to him.
Some people say, well, he made a bad choice. And that really makes me sad because I know he wasn't making a free choice.
Shaw's friends and family believe better information for them and a system where addiction isn't stigmatized and criminalized could have saved his life. There are many growing memorials in Vancouver these days to the dead from drug overdoses. Just down the street from the Patricia is a wall where people have handwritten more names of the dead.
They wrote that in memory of him, and yeah.
Murray Shaw's is there now.
It reminds me that this is where he died and it's not where he wanted to die.
Sasha Wood hopes by sharing her story, more families battling addiction can be spared her fate. Chris Brown, CBC News, Vancouver.